So for me, the most significant challenge I had being in those rooms is having a different opinion. And so being the only woman, the only minority, the only Asian, being the only mom, right? Definitely there's a lot of bias when you're different than the status quo of white, male, and stale. The quickest way to success is to have a mentor. And I definitely think my cultural value of just being scrappy and resilient. Always think to solve something.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to In the Making. Did you know that Asian Americans represent only 2.6% of executives in the United States, despite being one of the fastest growing workplaces? The glaring gap in representation is what drives Bernice Chao, an award winning author and founder of Asians in Advertising. As a second generation Asian American, navigating cultural and workplace challenges, Bernice turned her experiences into a mission to uplift her community, from establishing mentorship programs to inspiring confidence with her book, The Visibility Mindset. She's redefining leadership for Asian Americans. Let's uncover her journey for breaking barriers, amplifying voices, and leading with impact. Bernice, welcome to In the Making.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Same here. Bernice, we often talk about diversity, but let's face it, being the only in the room isn't just lonely, it's exhausting. Let's dive into what it really feels like to navigate those spaces. And so, my first question for you is, how did your cultural values as a second generation Asian American influence your career, especially in advertising?
Yes, I'm happy to talk about that. I'm currently the CCO, Chief Creative Officer of a company called TDW and Co, which is an advertising agency. I started with just the love of art, which is such a difference in terms of the priority careers that Asian families tell their children what's appropriate. They came from another country, went through all those troubles. And so there is those appropriate careers, I would like to say, which is doctor, lawyer, engineer, accountant. And then everything outside of that, we don't see as many faces that look like ours in those rooms. And so my journey really started with just loving art. I did have curricular hobbies of piano, Kumon, all those STEM building things. But I do really applaud my parents for when finances got really tight in our family, they always kind of kept art and drawing as a through line. I find this story of when I was 5 years old, they put a pencil drawing that I made on my mom's bedroom wall. And it was just such a proud moment for me. This is in direct contrast of her being overbearing, over caring on other things, but art, she just let me kind of be. That in turn made me think I was very good at it, and find my place in creativity. This is so unusual for our community because it's not one of those careers. I have an aunt who told me, as a woman of color, as an Asian woman, don't do this. Don't go into a creative path of advertising. She's just like, you won't survive. It doesn't make well for a mom. They don't have enough women in this career. But I just had such a passion for it. And I was like, well, what's the worst that can happen? And so
Mhm.
I went down this path to this for advertising and I just fell in love with it. I love the idea of problem solving, whether which brand you're trying to like solve for, on which medium. Is it television? Is it TikTok? Is it Instagram? And I think those cultural values of being Asian really started kind of showing up as I went through the work itself. Because, like I said, there wasn't that many of me.
This is so interesting, Bernice. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I graduated out of a media school in India. I wanted to pick journalism as my first profession. Second year is when you pick your specialization. And I got 1 mark less. So they actually denied journalism for me. And I spoke to my director, but they did not allow it.
Wow,
And I landed up doing advertising as my first major and in advertising agencies, Saatchi and Saatchi. And
fantastic.
then I worked with Ogilvy and Mather and FCB. So I worked with a lot of advertising agencies. My next question for you is, what was the most significant challenge you faced as the only minority on predominantly white male creative teams?
I have to talk about how when you watch that show Mad Men, we're primarily white males. And that cast of crew doesn't look that much different today, which is kind of sad, right? Because that was a while ago and not much has changed. And what happens when everyone looks like that? is their lived stories are the same. And I remember judging an award show for advertising, and I was like, how many commercials can they do with classic rock references with old white male celebrities?
Right.
And so for me, the most significant challenge I had being in those rooms is having a different opinion. Because oftentimes I'm the only female, because less than 12% of creative directors are women in the United States, which is actually a step up from the 3% that we were trying to achieve back, what, 10 years ago. We're still only at 12%. And then on top of that, being a minority, after 2021, when DI became a hot topic, I started seeing invites for me to be in meetings, which I had no part. And I was tokenized. I had no speaking rules. I was definitely there to be a face on the virtual screen. And
Right.
then I became a mom. And so being the only woman, the only minority, the only Asian, being the only mom, right? I saw a couple of things that happened when I became a mom was I felt like they were intentionally throttling my career where I was on all these high visibility projects with great budgets. And then all of a sudden, they took those away from me. I got those non promotable things. I got busy work. And when I asked what happened, they were like, "Oh, we're trying to help you out, manage time better for your life." I did not ask for this. I'm a grown woman. You can ask me what I would want for my career. And
True.
so I feel challenges show up for different places for different reasons, but definitely there's a lot of bias
Yeah.
when you're different than the status quo of white, male, and stale.
Oh, yeah. I mean, breaking into a space where you're not just underrepresented, but sometimes outright unseen, takes more than resilience. It takes audacity. And that's what you embody, Bernice. You've done that so beautifully. How did balancing cultural expectations and workplace norms shape your perspective on leadership?
I always talk about the dynamics of East and West because
Mhm.
I was brought up with the cultural expectations of the East.
Right.
I work in America where the workplace works on the Western culture. And so I usually compare some idioms that we heard growing up. So, couple of those, the loudest duck gets shot, the tallest bamboo gets cut, the highest nail gets hammered. And the Western side, you would say the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so if I'm going into rooms or if I'm asking to be on a project, if I'm asking for a raise, those cultural norms, I hope they accept me when I ask for this. I'm
Mhm.
being very deferential. If I ask for a raise, they're going to fire me. But on the Western side, right, their expectation is ask for it. If I don't ask for it, I don't really want it.
And then you're also stuck in that phase for a long time, right?
I didn't know that this was a thing. I always operated on my gut instincts, which was totally set in the East. Head down, work hard, do a great job, and therefore I will be seen for my work and properly promoted. Instead, that only allowed for more work. She can't be replaced at that lower end. She's the only one that will power through all those late nights and will not say no to things. And so, my perspective as a leader, you have to really understand what people are coming in with and know that they need a different type of style per person. How you lead can be very curated toward the group that you have.
It's so true. I've always noticed that, leadership isn't just about fitting into a mold, it's about breaking it and building a new one that reflects on all of us who we are as people. And you have done that. And I love that story about coming from the East meets West. And, I am from India, and the work life culture is completely different than what I did in my early days. When I moved here, I could not work in this country for 8 years because I was stuck on a spouse visa. So I lost a lot of my youth, and by the time everything had evolved and changed, I was not able to find those leaders who I could reach out and find that support. So I appreciate you talking about it, because in my coaching sessions, I tell women, don't be shy. If you want mentorship, ask for it. Find your niche and find the people who you can connect with, and they can connect you with the right people.
I 100% agree. And I wish I knew about mentorship earlier. I once read that the quickest way to success is to have a mentor. And of course, me Googling, how many mentors does an average white male have? And it was like three to
I love
five.
that.
At that moment in time, I was like, I think I maybe have one, maybe. And I thought your mentor was your manager, your work manager, which absolutely you're laughing because it's not true. Uh, Especially if you are the least likely to be liked, right? Just because you're so different than your manager. As a shy Asian, that's this cultural stigma. I had to kind of get over all those thoughts. I just need to talk to someone. I've never worked for another women creative. What is their story like? What's a mom's like as a creative? And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, suck it up. And I reached out to 10 women on LinkedIn, women I did not know, that I just saw their careers from afar, that I just admired. And I wrote a really personalized letter. I was so shocked when I believe 7 of 10 actually reached back. And of those
Wow.
7, I'm still in touch with today. On one of the calls, she asked me, what can I do for you? And I told her I had an interview and I want some advice. And she's like, who are you interviewing with? She's like, that's my good friend. I will let them know. And I got the job afterwards. So I always talk about the power of reaching out. You never know who's going to be a mentor, who's going to be a sponsor, someone that's going to help you push your career forward, or who's just going to be a lifelong friend. So mentorships are incredibly important. Take them offline as soon as possible.
That is so incredible. I do want to tell the audience that don't hesitate, don't be shy, and also don't be judgmental about the person next door to you or sitting next cubicle in your office. Learn to know them better. Bernice, movements don't start by accident. They start with someone brave enough to ask, why not me? And you have that spark and you have done something magical. What inspired you to create Asians in advertising, and what was your first step in making it a global movement?
Well, I would say it was never planned to be a global movement. And so that's been a nice surprise. Asians in Advertising is a nonprofit that was created 3.5 years ago, just from the idea of, hey, wouldn't it be nice if a few of us got together? In 2019, I looked around my office going, hey, there's 5 of us out of a 250-person office. This is in Los Angeles, in California. And I was like, let's start something. I was already hosting my local TEDx events for TEDx Culver City. And it's not that hard to set up a talk, have people come show up at things. I know how to do it. Let's get this started. And when 5 of us got together and we went over these stats that said Asians feel so underseen in media, in advertising, we're so lowly represented. Okay, this is a great place to start. So we were super organized and diligent. And then the excitement just faded by the fourth meeting. And culturally, we are taught to hold the door for others
Yeah.
and to not rock the boat. And if we do, we will get in trouble. So by the fourth meeting, it was like maybe other groups need this more than us, despite the facts, despite the stats. In 2019, Asians in Advertising domain bought everything. It wasn't until 2022 when we saw the rise of Asian hate, where I was like, oh my gosh, for us not creating that space, I'm starting to see the repercussions. And it's not just in advertising, it's in our
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah.
It's affecting my mom who has to walk down the streets. It's this incredible hate because we've never claimed space for ourselves. For the first time ever, I started seeing panels with a face that looked like mine.
Mm.
At one point, Adweek had a town hall and is all C-suite Asians. And
Wow.
I don't know if I fully realized that someone like me could get there. I was star-studded. These people went through the same challenges, the same microaggressions, the same biases, and were able to rise. And that really encouraged me. And one thing that they said at the end of the call is, we never do this. Why don't we do this more often? And I was going, you superstars don't have a secret collective where you talk to each other. There is no group for this. And of course, I've been, paying for this domain for the last 3 years. And the idea was just to get a couple of us together, 25 was the goal, into a Zoom hangout to talk about kind of what's going on. And that very first LinkedIn post, that's all it was, about 650 signups.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, from the idea of 5 to maybe hopefully 25 to 650, it was like, oh my gosh, this white space I identified all those years ago really does exist. And so Asians
Mhm.
in Advertising is now 7,000 and we're global. We do mentorship pairings every year to find someone that you can identify, see it to believe it. And so we do about 200 to 250 pairings from around the world every year. And we also do 30 scholarships. And so I'm incredibly grateful for this organization, for myself as well, because it is something that I truly needed. And I could see it really working for others as well. And I do think when you advocate for yourself, you can really inspire others to do the same and really
Yeah.
kind of grow that.
I love that. That was so beautifully said. Mentorship isn't just about pulling someone up, it's about lifting the entire community, and you've created a blueprint for that. So, kudos to you for doing what you have done and not giving up. You kind of manifested that seed, and then it became a plant and then a big tree now for you. What has been, Bernice, the most rewarding moment from building Asians in advertising? And I know you already kind of answered this briefly, but I would like to know more.
And there's so many micro rewarding moments. It's hard to kind of pick one.
Yeah.
Last year, we had our in person summit, our conference that we have the first week of API Heritage Month. It was really wonderful to see all these people in one room because we've
Mhm.
done it virtually for the first 2 years with people in the
Yeah.
room that are our allies. It was kind of like a very surreal moment.
That's beautiful. I'm so proud of you, Bernice, for creating something so magical and something that has not only helped so many people in the world of media and advertising, but also beyond that. I want to bring to the next segment where we're talking more about the legacy and personal growth. And visibility isn't just about seeking attention, it's about demanding recognition for who you are and what you bring to the table. So, what does the phrase visibility mindset mean to you? And why is it so critical for Asian American in professional spaces?
Well, visibility isn't about being the loudest voice, it's about being an impactful one. And what I say about that is a lot of times telling someone, build your personal brand, be visible is super scary. It's really being seen for what you're really great at and
Yeah.
making sure that people can identify that with you. For instance, most of us have social media. It's really easy just to like put everything on there, right? But then when someone looks at it, they're like, what am I really tracking here? There's like a lot of things that they could try to guess from what you're posting. However, if you're trying to be very impactful with your personal brand, maybe sticking to a couple of things, specific things are really helpful. And so when we talk about visibility, it is like, what do you want to be known for? If you were in an elevator ride, and that's why they call it an elevator pitch, and you have 2 minutes to tell me what you're about, what would you want to tell me? And then how can you make sure those are being articulated in those spaces that you're going into? So
Yeah.
for me, I like to say I love new business. I love projects where we're growing business and I have to pitch them because I'm really good at that. I love coming up with ideas that probably never get made because they're kind of expensive or big or splashy, but they're really fun to put together. So I usually tell people that's my strong suit. And for them, that's a win win. If they win that new business, hooray, right? And so, for this idea of why is crucial for Asian Americans specifically, is we're really not good about humble bragging. And so I do think it's really critical that we get really clear about what makes us good at things, especially if we walk into those rooms and people doubt us.
Mm.
There's times where I go in front of a new business client and it's a room full of white males on the client side, a group of white males behind me as well. And I
Yeah.
am the one thing in that room that is clearly very small because I'm about 5 feet 2 and not 6 feet tall, and I look different right off the bat. And when I'm taking up space to speak, especially if it is a new business pitch, I'm talking at least 50% of the meeting. I need to be seen in that room as someone that's credible. And I'm not a loud voice. And so,
Right.
whatever I can do to be visible, so I tell others that it doesn't even have to be verbal, your visibility, even if it's in the deck that you're showing. Second
Yeah.
page, when you have a team page, what can you write on there that they're like, oh gosh, I'm so glad we got her. This is the perfect person for the job. I pitched for Under Armour, which is a sports brand that
Mhm.
is pretty masculine. And I was the lead creative on that. And I remember on the team page, I was like, okay, first I'm going to put my picture first, take that space. And I wrote, because I do not watch football, I do not watch basketball, but I wrote that I've done an Ironman and that I swam with a great white shark for 2 blocks.
Mm.
So I know the athlete's mindset. So I don't come into that room and they just dismiss me for what I look like.
Yeah.
And that's something that's on a paper. And as we all do, we Google each other. I do it with my clients and I say, they're going to do the same with you. What's on your website? What's on your LinkedIn? These are places where you can curate what your identity is saying about you, what your visibility is, right? So if I can show, hey, I've maybe won some awards. Here are some statistics. These are great ways that when people see me in the room, they have things that are attached to who I am and give me that presence.
Wow, that was so well said, Bernice. I think I learned a lot, especially about visibility, mindset, and just in a complete sense about your personal brand. And you really nailed down the fact that when you really want to be visible, you need to understand what you're great at and what people would like to know you for. And stick to that one thing. And I do want to tell the audience that she is an award winning author, like I said in my introduction. And the visibility mindset isn't just a book, it's a rallying of cry for those who've been conditioned to stay invisible. Bernice, what is one bold action that Asian Americans can take today to increase their visibility and impact in the workplace?
Use your LinkedIn. And I say this because a lot of spaces I'm not invited to.
Mm,
So I'm not Whiskey Wednesday at my boss's house. I'm not getting asked to play basketball, golf, whatever. I'm just not there because I can't shoot, kind of the conversation. And I probably would make people feel uncomfortable if I was there.
yeah,
And so being present on LinkedIn gets you to top of mind. You can curate a space where you're just kind of floating back up every once in
yeah,
a while.
so
And so
true.
it's a kind of an underutilized tool for a lot of people. And I would say your bold action, post once a week. I read, maybe it's an old stat now, but if you post once a week on LinkedIn, you're in the top 2%. And they say if you're looking for a job, maybe post twice a week,
Yeah.
just so you're top of mind for people that maybe aren't inviting you to their circles regularly.
That was so well said. And I do want to tell the audience that being bold isn't just about being loud, it's about being undeniable. And that's the kind of action we need more in today's world. So, LinkedIn is definitely a wonderful platform. And like Bernice said, challenge yourself and you will start seeing the results. It's very critical that you plan it before you start posting because once you start, it can go in different directions.
And I would say find the voice that's authentic to you. Don't feel like you have to be a different voice. You can definitely do some research and figure out like where you feel the most comfortable in. And of course, don't feel like you have to like commit all at once. Definitely engage with it. I think it's incredibly
Yeah.
important.
Agree, absolutely. Bernice, I have one last question for you in this segment, which is as someone who's advocated for change, what does true allyship look like, and how can companies take responsibility for creating that equitable workspace?
I think true allyship is hard. I feel like there's so many discussions that change every so often. I remember when we had this conversation about how diversity is so incredibly important, and now diversity is not a thing again, and that, like to not recognize someone's background differences, you were not like actually, however, true allyship really just means to have an open mind, in my opinion, to be
Yeah.
open to learning and growing and knowing that things can change and that we're all on this learning journey. I always say it's not about calling someone out for saying something wrong, calling them in and helping to educate. 80% of people would rather run from a hard conversation than to have one. So know that you are not alone on not liking hard conversations. But if you have those hard conversations with that person today, you're creating a safe space for someone tomorrow.
Mm,
And so anytime I hear things that I'm like Maybe they shouldn't say the clients are going to Shanghai us, but I'm going to let them know that it's problematic so they don't say it again. I have a
Mm,
really good friend, and we were hanging out. We both had our sons with us. They were both about 2.5 at the time. And she looks at me and she goes, "My son is speaking like a Chinaman." She is from London. She is white. And I kind of was taken aback. I've never heard someone say that for someone who
yeah,
couldn't speak
same
well.
here.
And I was like, whoa. And this is someone I really love. This is a good friend. And so I didn't know how to approach this conversation, but it was really eating me up for a bit.
Mhm.
And so the biggest act of love here is to tell them.
Yes.
And I did. We had an open conversation. She didn't realize that this was problematic. She was like, "Oh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." And she's never said it again, and our friendship was repaired. I do think it's really important to have these conversations. I really wish I can go back in time and tell that one manager who used to imitate my Korean client and actually squint his eyes and do an accent. It was someone I really did like as a manager, but I just didn't have the courage to have that conversation at that time. I have a really great friend. Her name is Natalie. She's Mexican American. And so we were at
Mhm.
3 past jobs together. She's someone I really trust as to have in the room with me. And when something problematic occurs, she will actually speak up for me, and we will speak up for each other. And that's another great way an ally can come in. I met
Yeah.
the head of DEI at Warner Brothers, and it was a Black man. And he said, "My co partner at work is a white woman. She speaks on race. I speak on gender." And I do think when you have an ally that's from an outside group speaking on an issue, it could really help. And so, different ways allies can show up. So, we talked about educating yourself, we talked about having an open mind, we talked about supporting you in those conversations.
I love that, Bernice. I love those personal examples that you shared. Thank you so much. And I'm sure the audience is going to be super inspired. And just to echo with what Bernice just mentioned, I do want to say that true allyship isn't performative, it's transformative. So it's about doing the work when no one is watching, but at the same time, you can support each other and be the shoulder and the helping hand for each other in today's world. With that, Bernice, we are coming to the final segment, which is my most favorite, which is the rapid fire round. I love to ask some few quick and quirky questions if you're ready for it.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, ready to spill the secrets of your creative genius. So, what's one cultural value that has always guided you?
Oh my gosh, this is like the hardest rapid fire question. I definitely think my cultural value of just being scrappy and resilient. I always think there's a way to solve something.
Beautiful. One misconception about Asian Americans in professional spaces.
That they're quiet.
Love that. Find more adjectives or know that
Exactly.
person. Introvert or extrovert, and how does it shape your work?
Absolutely an introvert. I think being an introvert and how it shapes my work, I always think is a cosmic joke that I am now I speak a lot, because it's not natural for me to go out there and speak. But we talk about having that visibility mindset, and so if I can go and network in these spaces, we can find our own ways through those. And I love the idea that bravery isn't about being fearless. Bravery is about being scared and doing it anyway. And as an introvert, I do practice that a lot, especially going onto these spaces.
Other than the visibility mindset, one book you think every creative should read.
There is a book about teamwork called The Code that I really like. I think Brene Brown's books are really great. I love Malcolm Gladwell's books. Simon Sinek. Like there are so many people that I love listening to,
Yeah.
whether it's like Adam Grant and kind of these little hacks, which I really enjoy. I definitely love to consume media, especially when it
Love that.
comes to self-learning.
All right. And my last question is, what's your go to productivity hack?
I definitely need to have my space.
Mhm.
So I need to clean my space. I have a candle here that you can't see. I have a very clean and quiet room that's kind of removed from the rest of the house. And so that kind of gets me in the right settling place to really concentrate. I was taught as a young age that a cluttered room is a cluttered mind.
Yes, I
And so
agree.
It's definitely setting so that I can be fully in the moment of what I need to do.
Thank you so much, Bernice. That was amazing and so beautiful. I'm so glad we got a chance to get together and, create this magical episode and the podcast. Your journey isn't just inspiring, it's a call to action. You've shown us what it means to rise above challenges, to know yourself, build a community where one didn't exist, one led with purpose, with all your heart. And from navigating cultural identity to redefining leadership, your work is leaving a legacy not just for the Asian American community, but for all of us striving to make a difference. For everyone tuning in today, let this be a reminder that visibility isn't about blending in, it's about standing out, owning your story, and making sure your voice is heard. Bernice, thank you for showing us the power of what's possible when you lead with boldness, empathy, and authenticity. And my lovely viewers, please don't forget to follow, share, subscribe,